Hello, and welcome to another episode of This, That, and the Other. With football season at the midway point right now, I ran across a magazine that I used to subscribe to several years ago. I used to have a whole bunch of issues, and they were probably thrown away when we were moving. And anyway, I did save one. It's, I guess, mainly because it has an article about the United States Football League, the USFL. And this issue has a picture of Herschel Walker when he played for the New Jersey Generals. It's the August 1983 issue, the year that the United States Football League came into existence. Well, what I'm going to be talking about is actually the history of the AAFC and how that league did. Little history on the AAFC. I took some information from this article in this magazine by Jack Clary, and took notes, and just I'm kind of summarizing what he wrote. The AAFC existed from 1946 to 1949 and was founded by Arch Ward, the nation's most renowned sports editor and promoter, working for the Chicago Tribune. He founded All-Star baseball and college All-Star football games. I actually remember the college All-Star games. The Super Bowl winner would face the college team of college All-Stars. This was probably prior to the NFL preseason starting. The game was played at Soldier Field in Chicago, and when salaries started becoming bigger, players were worried about that particular game could cause a career-ending injury and keep a player from playing in the NFL and making the big money he had the potential to make. So that game was discontinued. I think 1975 may have been the last one they played against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Imagine college all-star players playing against a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers. That team was a very physical football team back in the 70s, as were the Oakland Raiders. They both were. He knew that coast-to-coast air travel would send sports to a new height. He persuaded a group of wealthy men. Tony Morabito in San Francisco tried to bring football to the Bay Area since 1940, but the NFL didn't want a team on the West Coast because of the cost of transporting players back and forth to San Francisco away teams, and then transporting the 49ers to the East Coast. Too much money would have been involved in that, so the NFL did not want to do that. Jim Brule, a Buffalo oil man, deposited $25,000 for a team, but Buffalo was not considered major league back then. Arthur McBride tried to buy the Cleveland Browns from Dan Reeves, but was turned down. Dan Topping, co-owner of the Yankees, and Billy Cox of the Brooklyn Dodgers liked the idea of joining another sport. So you had, at the time, you had like the baseball Yankees. They also named the football team the Yankees, and the same with the Brooklyn Dodgers. They named the football team the Brooklyn Dodgers as well. Sound confusing? It confuses me sometimes. Cox brought his first NFL Dodgers en masse to the AAFC. Ben Lindheimer, a Chicago industrialist, agreed to establish the LA Dons along with Bob Hope, Don Amici, Bing Crosby, and Pat O'Brien. The San Francisco 49ers and Chicago Rockets players, a lot of them came from military bases in California, a Marine base, and in El Toro, and a Navy base out near San Francisco. A lot of the players on those teams came from the military service teams. Jim Cowley, the first commissioner, said there were more financial resources than the NFL teams. They had more financial resources. Later an owner and coach of the Chicago Rockets. But money doesn't always make it work, like we always know. Chicago never established a strong team competing against the Bears and Cardinals. The Miami Seahawks only lasted one season. That was probably the biggest disaster in the AAFC. Nearly every game in the Orange Bowl was played in driving rainstorms. I'm sure that had a lot to do with why the attendance was low. They weren't making money. Paul Brown established the Cleveland Browns, which was the most successful team the AAFC had. Paul's business partner, Frosty Froberg, gave Harvey Hester, the Seahawks owner, a hefty visitor's share for the first AAFC game in Cleveland, only to learn the next day that Miami fled the city without paying its hotel bill and food bills. Miami folded and became the Baltimore Colts in 1947, and when they became the Baltimore Colts, they started out wearing leather Kelly green helmets, and next year or next 2 years they wore the regular helmets like they have now. It was a silver helmet with a green stripe down the middle. The jerseys were Kelly green. That's the AAFC Baltimore Colts. And with the exception of the Rockets, the rest of the AFC outdrew the NFL for 3 seasons. I wanted to mention also that I've done a previous show back, I think 2012, discussing the various helmets that the Baltimore Colts teams have had throughout the years. The Baltimore Colts, Ravens, and if you want to look at that, you can go farther back and search for it, and that's the show on the Baltimore football helmets. The league averaged nearly 30,000 fans per game in the first season, despite the Seahawks, Rockets, and Dons being in existence. In 1946, the Browns' total attendance was over 400,000 for the year. 4 exceeded 60,000 one season after the Rams won the NFL title, so they had to leave Cleveland because their attendance was below 100,000. It sounds like the Cleveland Rams were too much pressure for attendance by the Cleveland Browns, and that's what caused the Rams to Dan Reeves to relocate them to Los Angeles to be the Los Angeles Rams for years, and now they're the St. Louis Rams. 82,675 came to Los Angeles to watch the Dons play the Yankees. The 49ers played at Kezar Stadium, and the Yankees enjoyed crowds over 50,000. The 49ers and Rockets came from service teams, like what I was mentioning. I mentioned it, but I had this also written in the notes. There was so much talent available that no draft was necessary. After the war, these players that had played in the NFL had to leave the NFL to serve their country, had no ties to their NFL teams, so the AAFC offered better money, and it attracted more players came to them to play. They were paid more than the NFL teams paid them. They played a 14-game schedule, and the NFL didn't start doing that until 1961. And I'm going to go ahead and read some stuff from a few paragraphs from this Football Digest from this article, because this one I might as well read the whole thing than try to jot down bits and pieces from it. 1948, Branch Rickey, then president of both baseball and football Dodgers, convinced the owners that a team could play 3 games in a week. Thus, the Browns went to New York in mid-November, where they beat the Yankees, then flew to Los Angeles and beat the Dons 4 days later on Thanksgiving Day. The Browns then flew to San Francisco for a game 3 days after that on Sunday with the 49ers. Imagine all the wear and tear it put on those players doing that, and probably very fatigued after playing 3 games in 1 week. That was for the conference title, Paul Brown recalled. And we had Otto Graham on crutches. So I took all of our players to a Sulphur Springs spa north of San Francisco, and all we did was take baths for 2 days to get rid of the soreness. Otto could hardly walk the morning of the game, but at kickoff he was telling me he'd give it a try. He wound up playing the entire game, and we won. In the end, though, Brown and others admit that Cleveland's total dominance, 4 titles in 4 seasons, they won the title every year, took away the much-needed competitiveness of the league. The failure to anchor a solid franchise in Chicago and Linsheimer's illness in 1949 took him away from active ownership. He was supporting both the Dons and Chicago Hornets. Further weakened the league at a time when teams such as Buffalo and Baltimore were beginning to match the Browns, Yankees, and 49ers. The continued money drain, television was still a decade away from providing any kind of notable payouts, spelled the difference between the failure of the AAFC and the success of the American Football League in the 1960s. However, in 1949, the NFL was hurting just as badly and threatened with the loss of 4 teams. Detroit, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, and New York Bulldogs, the 2 leagues agreed to merge. New York Bulldogs played, I believe, in Polo Grounds in New York. That team only lasted 1 season. All 8 AAFC AAFC teams were invited to join the NFL, but only the Browns, 49ers, and Colts came aboard. Players from the other teams were divided up among all the teams in pro football. In 1950, they began a great march to prosperity that began with the AAFC's champion Browns beating the NFL champion Eagles 35-10 in the first game of that season. Sadly, though the NFL record book never has recognized any of the individual accomplishments for those 4 AAFC years. One reason is lack of accurate records, but that doesn't wash because all the records are still available. So, too, are some of the statisticians who compiled them, but they are just as accurate as those kept by the NFL in those years. So far now, only the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio includes the AAFC records and its compilations. It's too bad because the AAFC was the prime mover in getting pro football out of the dark ages and into the sunshine that has so glamorized it over the past quarter century. So I'm sure a lot of people today didn't even know this AAFC even existed. Later on, you had the AFL, which was a successful venture. They started out with 8 teams, and I believe ended up with 10. They later expanded and had the Miami Dolphins. I believe their last expansion team was the Cincinnati Bengals, and they had one of the reasons they succeeded was they had teams in cities the NFL didn't have, and they finally ultimately merged with the NFL in 1970. I believe, and then you had the WFL, which was a real disaster. Their team that lasted a year, and then they came with what they called the new WFL, and that only lasted through I think half the season of 1975 before the league folded. It only lasted like a year and a half. The USFL, that was another league that they had some cool helmets. They did sign some good players from. I think 3 years in a row they signed the Heisman Trophy winners, and I remember the big one was signing Herschel Walker. The New Jersey Generals signed him for like $20 million, I think, something like that. But that league only lasted 3 years as well. And you had the XFL that lasted a year. I believe after one season they couldn't secure a television contract, so they folded. And there have been some other leagues that have tried to challenge the NFL as well. But I don't think it's possible to have another succeed with another league challenging the NFL. I just don't think it works. The USFL was playing spring football, but football really does not have appeal in the spring. It's you got baseball season coming up. Plus, it gets too hot to be playing football too in those years. The USFL started I think in March, and it went on until maybe the championship was in July. So you had teams playing games in June, and when the weather was starting to get hot and humid. So I remember going to some Federals games at RFK Stadium, and how hot it was close to the end of the season. I remember that. I remember teams too at the end of the year were starting to wear white jerseys at home because of how hot it was. I remember seeing that there as well. Birmingham started doing that when the weather warmed up. Tampa Bay, Boston, all those teams. But anyway, that's what information I was able to get on the AAFC from this article from Football Digest, and pretty interesting article, and just thought I'd share this historical moment with you. And as always, thanks for watching.